With everything happening nowadays, it has been a big push for Canadians to shop local, to buy Canadian-based products and support our local industry. What's going on, guys? My name is Andrew, and on the topic of shopping for Canadian-based products, I think we should first start to break it down into the most common categories that we would pay attention to and put an effort towards buying Canadian. And I think where everybody will feel the most impact of an escalating trade war will likely be at the grocery stores. This is where a lot of the times we don't always, as consumers, pay attention to the label saying where the product is coming from, but we pay more attention to the prices and the sales. And on top of that, when you are shopping, it's actually sometimes hard to even tell, because if you pay attention to this, sometimes if you go by the food aisles, you will see, let's say, a stack of tomatoes there, and they will say product of Canada. And although it says that, you might look at the tomato and then you'll see that it's imported from somewhere in the US or South America. And I don't want to assume that grocery stores are trying to be misleading, but nonetheless, I think as a consumer, you should pay attention to these things. So how do you shop for a Canadian product and what does it mean to you? Well, recently, many of you probably started getting messages from your premiers. I know that I got a text message from Doug Ford saying, hey, this is now the time for you to support Canadian industry and you should be shopping local product. Personally, I think we should have always been doing that. So here we are, better late than never. The fact of the matter is this: when you're shopping for groceries, if you are buying Canadian product, very often you're going to find that it's going to be a little more expensive than the imported product. But if tariffs do come into play, you will find that even those once more affordable products are going to get more expensive, maybe putting them on par or kind of closing the gap between the US product and the Canadian product to either be cheaper or about the same. And when that happens, I personally believe it's extremely important to buy Canadian products. And it's not just the price that you should consider. When shopping for groceries, as a general rule, the farther a product has to travel, the more pesticides and chemicals they have to use in order to keep the product and transport it safely and ensure that the product doesn't rot in the process. To that point, my choice has always been to buy product as geographically close as possible to where you live, because the food doesn't have to travel as much of a distance, hence less pesticides. Right now, as it stands, more grocery stores are starting to label Canadian-based products so that it is easier for consumers to identify. And you'd be surprised, there's actually quite a lot of things that are made by Canadian companies. And you might also be surprised with just how many things you're buying that is American. And it also depends on where it is that you're shopping. As a general rule, the bigger the store, the more likely it is to be selling American product, whereas the smaller stores are often shopping a little more local. For example, if you go to your local variety store and you're buying fruits and vegetables there, they are almost definitely getting them from local farmers or local wholesalers. And that is simply because they don't have the buying capacity in order to get those cheaper tomatoes or cheaper fruits and vegetables that you would get if you're buying in larger quantity. The fact of the matter is this will end up being more expensive for us as consumers at large, but it's important to remember that anytime you're spending more money, it's usually not without any benefit. And it's not just we want to support local industry alone. When companies cannot compete with price, they often choose to compete with quality. It's just sometimes that quality is not as marketable and not as appealing as simply a cheaper label price. So when you're reading the label and trying to determine if this is in fact a Canadian product, an interesting thing I only recently learned was that if it says product of Canada, it means that it is made 98% in Canada. But when it says made in Canada, the requirement for that label is only that it is 51% made in Canada, which for fresh produce is a lot more clear, but when you're starting to buy more packaged goods, those labels will start to make a difference, so pay attention to those. So big corporations like Costco has a lot of the products coming from the US. I mean, you look at anything that they have, and it's kind of funny to me that we have a lot of, for example, dairy products, egg products, we have a lot of our own beef, we have tons of meat products. Like they sell tubes of ground beef and it's a US based product and it's pretty competitively priced. And you find a lot of people just buying this US based product to save a couple of bucks. But I get it, you know, a couple of bucks here, a couple of bucks there, it adds up to quite a bit. Now, will 25% tariffs mean that our cost of living will go up 25%? The hard truth is that it could go up even more for a variety of reasons. Let's say we have a product that's selling for $100 and they need to make 40% profit. That's $40 on the $100 that they need to do. They need to price this product at $140 on the market. Now let's say that 25% tariff hits that product. That product now goes to the importer at $125. And in order for them to make a 40% profit on that $125, they have to now put it on the shelf for $190. So something that was going to cost you $140 is now going to cost you $190. And that is more than a 25% increase to the products we want to buy. But now when we're talking about other things that we want to support Canadian industry in, how do we go about it and what might we be looking at? Well, the next thing that people consume on a more regular basis are things like clothes, furniture, and other such things. There are actually quite a few Canadian companies that you can find out about, and there is actually a good website that I found as a resource. It's called madeinca.ca, and it's essentially like a catalog of Canadian-based products, companies, and other such things to help you if you're wondering about where and how to go about purchasing things. But companies like Aritzia, Lululemon, Canada Goose, and other such companies are all Canadian brands that manufacture great product, and arguably they are more expensive. But remember, where companies cannot always compete in price, they do compete in quality, but you can make your own judgments on that. Now, in the previous video, one of the things I talked about was cars. Automotive industry. Now, that one becomes a little bit more complicated because Canada doesn't have any Canadian brands in the automotive industry per se. However, we do manufacture cars in Canada. Now, this one is a bit more of an investment, and I understand that people have preferences. However, there is something to be considered here when we're talking about what car we buy and why we buy it. For example, certain cars for the longest time have been manufactured in Canada. For example, we have the Ford plant in Ontario that manufactures a variety of vehicles, but they're not always all made entirely here. Cars can end up crossing the border multiple times in the lifetime of their construction. But the next best thing to look at aside from the brands is what automotive companies are providing jobs to Canadians and paying taxes in Canada. Cars like the Honda Civic, the Toyota RAV4, the Lexus RX, the Ford Edge, the Chevy Silverado, and I'm pretty sure the Chrysler 300 and the Chevy Camaro were manufactured in Ontario, but I think one of those got discontinued. But the point is that at least these companies are manufacturing in Canada, providing jobs to Canadians. And remember, this is important at large because no matter what industry you're in, if you're in the trades or the service industry, people that have jobs and are making money will go out and shop and are likely to consume your services, be it directly or indirectly through your employer. And to support companies that bring something back to our local economy is valuable. Now, there are cases where companies will flip the bill themselves and not front that tariff to the consumer, and that's usually when companies believe that the tariff is just temporary because they don't want to lose market share, and likely other companies are going to be competing by eating that cost of that tariff themselves. They might choose to just weather this cost if they feel that everything between Canada and the US will just settle. But more than likely, when this 30-day period has elapsed, both countries are going to go back to the negotiating table and they're going to start talking. And if healthy agreements and consensus cannot be made, cost of living is going to go up. So what can we do about it? Well, this is why I still say that it's important to diversify. You know, on our channel, we talk a lot about how to leverage your real estate and invest your money properly so that you're protected and insulated against anything that's happening in our local economy. You know, for me, and I'm sure a lot of you, Canada has always been home, and being Canadian is something I identify with. Right now, with all the changes that are happening, there's going to be good and there's going to be bad as a result of it, but we don't want the people that we are taking care of and that we're supporting to suffer in the process, so we need to insulate ourselves. And how do we do that? Well, the way that we've been talking about doing this has a lot to do with diversifying into US assets. If we're going to be real about it, the US is playing a good and strong game, and that doesn't mean that we have to entertain this idea of becoming the 51st state or something stupid like that, but it does mean that you have to invest intelligently. And part of what that means in many of these cases is to diversify your real estate into the US market where possible. And this is what we've been doing over the last 2 years now. We've accumulated 44 units since we started, and it has been working great for us. So if that is something that interests you, and you want to diversify your investments so you can start earning US dollars to hedge against everything that's happening right now, pay for those extra costs at the grocery store, likely an increased cost of gas, construction materials, you name it, things are probably going to go up. You need to be protected. And if you want to do that via real estate and want to know how, make sure to get in touch with us. We've created this cross-border investing blueprint for Canadians where we've ironed out everything you need to know about how you can buy properties in the US properly and legally, where we're going to show you how to crunch numbers, how to identify markets that best suit your investment needs, and everything in between. So if you want to know more about that, click on the link below. Otherwise, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.